Okay, so I am analyzing Gatsby's funeral scene, which starts on page 174 through 175 in chapter 9. And I'll just start off by reading it. So, about 5 o'clock, our procession of 3 cars reached the cemetery and stopped in a thick drizzle beside the gate. First, a motor hearse, horribly black and wet, then Mr. Gatz and the minister and I in the limousine, and a little later 4 or 5 servants and the postman from West Egg and Gatsby's station wagon, all wet to the skin. As we started through the gate into the cemetery, I heard a car stop and then the sound of someone splashing after us over the soggy ground. I looked around. It was the man with allied glasses whom I had found marveling over Gatsby's books in the library one night 3 months before. I'd never seen him since. I don't know how he knew about the funeral or even his name. The rain poured down his thick glasses, and he took them off and wiped them to see the protecting canvas unroll from Gatsby's grave. I tried to think about Gatsby then for a moment, but he was already too far away, and I could only remember without resentment that Daisy hadn't sent a message or a flower. Dimly I heard someone murmur, "Blessed are the dead that the rain falls on," and then the allied man said, "Amen to that," in a brave voice. We straggled down quickly through the rain to the cars. Allied spoke to me by the gate. "I couldn't get to the house," he remarked. Neither could anybody else. "Go on," he started. "Why, my God, they used to go there by the hundreds." He took off his glasses and wiped them again, outside and in. "The poor son of a bitch," he said. So it's very interesting the way Nick starts off this passage because only 3 cars attend the funeral, but it's also raining, and it kind of sets up the scene to be very dramatic and heart-wrenching, but in reality it's very anticlimactic and almost pathetic just due to the minimal number of people who actually attend. And among these people who attend is Mr. Gatsby's father, and his character is quite different from Gatsby's because he's very quiet and soft-spoken, while Gatsby is very dramatic and he calls attention to himself. And it actually makes Gatsby's character a little bit more human simply for having a parent figure present, and it also makes him a little bit more despicable for leaving such a, it appears, a nice man. And in addition to Mr. Gatz, a couple of servants come, and that's probably out of courtesy, because right before Gatsby's death, he actually fired most of his servants. And then the allied glasses man from the library scene actually shows up, and we never really know who this man is, as Nick says. I don't know how he knew about the funeral, even his name. And he's kind of a mysterious character because so little people show up. It's interesting that he's one out of the few who actually do. And I think it's also important to note here how frequently his glasses are actually mentioned. And this is almost a connection back to the glasses of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg in the Valley of Ashes between West Egg and New York on the billboard. And these glasses are very significant because they're present kind of during the darker scenes when the characters are at their worst or at their most fragile. And originally we see these when Nick is accompanying Tom when he's actually headed to go have an affair. And they're seen again when Nick and Gatsby are going to lunch, where Nick finds out that Gatsby's in a little bit of sketchy business. And they're also present during Myrtle's death. And another interesting thing about this character is that he's only present in 2 scenes throughout the novel, at the very start and the actually very finish of Nick and Gatsby's relationship throughout the novel. Originally in the library scene when Nick attends his first Gatsby party, and at the end in this funeral scene right here. So the next sentence that Nick says is quite interesting. He says, "I tried to think about Gatsby then for a moment, but he was already too far away, and I could only remember without resentment that Daisy hadn't sent a message or a flower." So the first part of the sentence is interesting because he describes Gatsby as too far away, which is probably a result of him only knowing Gatsby for 3 months, which seems like quite a small timeline for all of the events that transpired throughout the novel. And then additionally, he expects Daisy to send a message or a flower, which connects back to the letter that Daisy received on her wedding night from Gatsby, and to the flower scene where Daisy and Gatsby are reconnected when Gatsby brings all the flowers to Nick's apartment. So then someone says, "Blessed are the dead whom the rain falls on," and then the allied man says, "Amen to that," which is quite interesting again because the allied man being connected to the glasses. And the glasses almost represent a godlike figure, because again they're present during all like of the darker scenes when the characters are at their worst or their most fragile. Um, so there's a little bit of a religious motif right there that we see throughout the novel. And then the owl-eyed man says to Nick, "I couldn't get to the house," which is pretty interesting because it seems like people knew Gatsby more for his possessions and for his house and for his wealth and influence than they actually did for his personality and for his friendship. And which is probably why so little people actually attended his funeral and why so many people associated themselves with him when he was alive. And then this passage is concluded with a statement from the Allied man, "The poor son of a bitch." And this one is quite ironic because is Gatsby really a poor son of a bitch? So there's two definitions of the word poor, and there's poor as in poverty, or there's poor as in misfortunate, or something like that. And Gatsby isn't really either of these things. He lived quite a privileged and wealthy life. And it's really questionable as to whether or not Gatsby deserves anybody's sympathies right now, just due to his behavior towards the end of the novel, and trying to force Daisy to tell Tom that she didn't really love him. So you kind of end it on an ironic note, and it's up to the reader to decide whether or not they think he's a poor son of a bitch or not. So that's it. Thank you for listening to my analysis of the funeral scene of The Great Gatsby.